All right. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Smith, and my novel is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and the title of my thesis is The Confrontation of Biases and Presumptions in To Kill a Mockingbird. Throughout our world today, there are several examples or events that expose our predilections or narrow-mindedness, whether it be first-hand impressions, faulty judgments, or racism. In the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, there's also several characters that illustrate their predilections and biases, and that also sets sort of a guide for how we can, in our lives, confront ourselves. Also, the characters themselves reveal the importance of why self-confrontation needs to happen. Also, when ignorance is defeated, we become more open-minded, and that can be seen throughout the novel as well with many characters. This is what happens in the novel is relevant today due to the fact that we can relate to the characters through our predilections and preconceived notions. In order to defeat ignorance, we need to confront our biases, presumptions, and do exactly what the characters in To Kill a Mockingbird did. The summary of the novel is based during the 1930s in a fictional town by the name of Maycomb in the state of Alabama. We learn about Jem, Scout, and Dill. They're all three best friends who endure many troubling events with each other. We also learn about Atticus Finch, the father of Jem and Scout, who strives to prove the innocence of Tom Robinson, an African-American accused of assault towards a white woman. We also learn about Boo Radley. He's the definition of the town's fear of the unknown, and his real name is Arthur Radley. We learn later in the novel, mostly towards the end, that he saves Jem and Scout from almost being murdered. I wanted to start off with discussing Jem, our main character. He also has several examples that indeed have his preconceived notions exposed, and he directs his preconceived notions towards people younger than him. That can be seen with the way he treats his younger sister, Scout. He believes that since his younger sister is younger than him, she is more immature and lacks understanding. But this indeed reveals that Jem is prideful. He thinks that all because someone younger than him cannot have the knowledge that he obtains. This can be seen when he says to Reverend Skies and his sister Scout when they were listening in on the court case. He says, "Ah, hush, she does not understand it, Reverend. She ain't 9 yet." That right there shows that Jem is indeed biased and presumptuous towards his younger sister, Scout. Also, his encounter with Mrs. Dubois. Mrs. Dubois was Jem's neighbor, who happened to say very insulting things about Jem's father, Atticus. While in retaliation, Jem decides to chop down all of Mrs. Dubois' camellia bushes. As punishment, Jem has to read to Mrs. Dubois every night until she unfortunately passes away. This example away, he doesn't realize that what she's going through is withdrawals. He notices that she has what he describes as sort of like a disease. He's kind of disgusted by it, and he realizes that in the end he was being rude towards someone who was being rude based on the way. She gives Jem a gift. That gift is a white camellia flower, and the significance of that is that Mrs. Dubois believed Jem did indeed learn from his biases. Jem also, of course, being rude to someone he didn't know was fighting their own issues as well. I also want to discuss Scout, our protagonist of the novel. She displays several assumptions and narrow-mindedness towards people different from her. That can be seen with her encounter with Walter Cunningham. Walter Cunningham was a classmate who happened to be in the lower class of society in the town of Maycomb. And of course, Scout was never really exposed to people different from her. So in her encounter with Walter Cunningham, she invites him over one night to enjoy supper at her house. She was appalled by his eating habits, and she lets that be known to him, and she's in fact disgusted. Well, as punishment, Scout is punished by Calpurnia, who is the Finch's housekeeper, and all of this biases that she has towards people that are different from her, it prevents her from being understanding and making connections. Also, her rumors and beliefs about Boo Radley. Boo Radley's nickname, Boo, came into existence through Jem, Scout, and Dill when they thought of Boo Radley as nothing but a scary man, but in reality, Boo Radley is a well-intentioned but reclusive man. Her confrontation happens when she learns from others' experiences and takes in advice. Although Scout being a young child, she's bound to be ignorant and have no filter. But of course, she doesn't realize that her ignorance is indeed very cruel to other people, and it hurts people as well. When she takes in her father Atticus' advice, this can be seen when she was quick to judge her school teacher, Miss Caroline, towards her ignorance towards Maycomb. Her father tells Scout, "Until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." Atticus was informing his daughter that until you decide to look at things from another person's point of view, you won't really be able to make connections. And once she decides to make that choice of being understanding, she's then able to make better judgments and make better connections with people. I also want to discuss Miss Caroline, Scout school teacher. She's another outsider of Maycomb, so of course she is also ignorant towards Maycomb as well. And a scout describes she's where the persons of no background come from. So Miss Caroline being from North Alabama, Winston County, she is ignorant towards the Maycomb, but this can be seen with her encounter with Walter Cunningham. Walter Cunningham being a symbol for the town's lower class of people, she asked Walter Cunningham, "Did you forget your lunch this morning?" and proceeds to offer him a quarter. Well, Miss Caroline, of course, this was a blind mistake. She didn't realize what she was doing was actually an insult towards Cunningham, and she couldn't understand her students based on her ignorance. Well, her confrontation happens when Scout challenges her. Scout was the number one student that she taught her first year. Was all the times that Scout challenged her, she let Miss Caroline know that you're indeed being very insulting towards your students. And of course, Miss Caroline was upset. She didn't believe that she was doing anything wrong, but her confrontation reveals that she indeed realized she was being very insulting, and Scout helps her address her issues that she has. Lastly, I want to discuss Aunt Alexandra. She has several examples, quite a bit actually, of her impotent judgments towards Maycomb and its lower class and African Americans. She is judgmental towards Calpurnia, the Finch's housekeeper, who is also an African American. Calpurnia being she's significant in the novel due to the fact that she was the mother figure for Jim and Scout. Aunt Alexandra can be seen calling the Cunninghams trash as well. The Cunninghams, of course, being the lower part of society. Aunt Alexandra can be seen insulting them when she informs Scout, but they're not our kind of folks. Aunt Alexandra is not fond of the Cunninghams due to the fact that they are in the lower society, and by the fact that they are not on Aunt Alexandra's level. All of Aunt Alexandra's imputed judgments reveal that she thinks way too highly of herself. And she addresses this when she realizes that she cannot change. She finally humbles herself and realizes that her family is not any better than anyone else's. And when Tom Robinson was killed later in the novel out of racism. Tom was killed trying to escape from prison, but of course he was found guilty for a crime he did not commit. Lastly, I want to discuss how confrontation is seen in our lives today and how it's relevant to the novel. Our preconceptions can change based on circumstances around us, but it's not always going to be on our own terms. When a perspective shift happens, that can happen when we accept change. It's basically when we're able to see things in a different light. We accept the fact that we were making mistakes. We are able then to accept change, and that can be seen in To Kill a Mockingbird's and the characters because they change after their confrontation happened. Also, when we take an advice and learn from others' experiences, we're then able to gain more awareness. And with that being said, we become less closed-minded. Lastly, when we humble ourselves, that can be seen mostly with Aunt Alexandra, is when we accept that the fact that our predispositions, presumptuous behavior, was insulting, our perspective then can change. With that being said, when we accept confrontation, our ignorance can be defeated. So several characters in To Kill a Mockingbird all reveal closed-mindedness and impotent behavior. Jim, Scout, Miss Caroline, and Alexandra were all great examples that showed why we need to confront our biases or assumptions. When ignorance is defeated, we can become more aware, and also with ignorance being defeated, we become actually a perspective shift can happen. Of course, we're able to see things in a different light, and that's why it's beneficial, because it leads to escape from a simple world. All of this is relevant today because there is a relationship between us and the characters. The characters, of course, is based, of course, it being a fictional novel. Of course, we may not endure the same things the characters endured in the novel, but we can indeed accept change, we can humble ourselves, or we can take an advice and learn from others' experiences. So the characters themselves reveal that there is a way for us to change our mindset, especially with Jim, Scout, Miss Caroline, and Aunt Alexandra were all great examples. And in order to defeat our ignorance, we can do that because there's a solution that can be found in To Kill a Mockingbird itself. And with that being said, that's able to happen due to the fact that there's a relationship between the characters, ourselves, and the world around us. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Are there any questions from the audience?
Yes.
Do you think it's ironic because in the book, Jim and Scout are seen as black and they're making judgments on white people? That's ironic. Or was the author trying to convey that in any way?
You mind repeating the question?
Like since in our society or in there, whenever it was written, black people were looked down upon.
Yes.
And the author uses specifically black people and seeing how they're through their eyes and making judgments of white people. Do you think the author did that on purpose or?
Yes, of course, this book was published in 1960. So Harper Lee, when she published this book, she was trying to make a point that being racist, it's not really going to get us anywhere. And I can see where you're coming from due to the fact that it is quite ironic because it can be seen from an African American's point of view that we never know what someone's thinking. So for all we know, the African Americans, the book, it is, in fact, Calpurnia saying in the home, you never know what she said about Atticus, Jim, or Scout, them being a totally different skin color than her. She, of course, probably had a negative outlook on them. And white people, of course, too, due to the fact, but I guarantee you once she started living with Jim, Atticus, and Finch, her perspective began to change as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
Because you've spent so much time working on this paper and working on biases and presumptions, have you been able to take some of the tools that you've seen, that you've learned from this book and apply it in maybe your own biases and presumptions?
Yes, especially when it comes to the humbling ourselves part. I believe that is something that's important because it helps us open our eyes, basically. It helps us realize that it's just admitting that we're sorry in some cases. And when we're able to do that, it helps us make better connections. And that can be seen with Scout, Jim, Aunt Alexandra, and Miss Caroline, is when we finally accept the fact that we were actually being rude, and sometimes we don't realize we are. So yes, thank you.
All right, do you want another question, or are you good? I guess I
Take
should.
another question.
Okay, I have one prepared. Hold on, let's see. Oh. Okay. Do you think our world is more or less biased since the time the book was written?
Yes, I wouldn't necessarily, it could potentially be more, but I think with all that's been going on in these past couple of years, I believe it's almost like history's repeated itself. So I would say the time that, of course, it was published in 1960, so the civil rights movement and all that, that can definitely be seen in our world today. So I believe it potentially could have, or we potentially could be more biased, but I'd say it's on an equal level. What potentially could, yeah.
And one more
How do
question.
you think the media has possibly changed biases?
The media?
Yeah.
Yes, that definitely could change due to the fact that people have their own opinions. So it's just gonna like, in other words, stir the pot. People would begin to think, like, hopping on the bandwagon. People would begin to believe what another person's believing because that's what they want to believe. So therefore, it would add more, people would begin to be more biased due to the fact that just other influences and whatnot.
Excellent job. Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, let's stop this. Okay, do you know how to stop recording?
Do you need help?
Yes, okay, so what's funny is we did this all last year and you'd think I am like, I don't know.
I think
the
it's
name.
I think it's chilling.
Yeah.
I think it's
Um,
I think you want to go to the thing right there, and then yeah.
Stop recording. Perfect. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate your help.
We're gonna go see Eliza's sister.
All right.
Great job.
Hey, that one's mine. Yes, it is. This one can have you can have any one of those other ones, but this one was mine.